5 of you people go out and see what happens. And, you know, nobody's going to miss you all because the 5,000 people are dead. And we're just.
Yeah, there's 100, almost, I mean, we've almost reached 130,000.
Yeah, but everything's fine, though.
You know, it's like they have Chief Wiggum, you know, from The Simpsons. Just nothing to see here, just moving along. Nothing to see, just everything's fine.
No, that's Andy Gump.
Oh, is that?
that's Andy Gump.
There you go.
All right, so I think we're, I think it's coming on now. JB is going to be a teensy bit late. He just sent me a message. I think he's got some kind of.
Well, he's right there.
Oh, he is? Oh, no, he's there. Okay, good. Okay, good.
Wow.
All right.
I thought I was a stoner.
You know, you used to be able to get the death penalty in Texas for, you know, weed, unless you paid the cop $20. Okay, so.
Broke him off a little something.
No, it was just you know, Texas back in those days. You know, the police always had to supplement your pay. Okay.
All right. All the testosterone now. I'll shut up because my lovely wife, is on. Good morning, Patience.
Hi, Patience.
Good morning.
All right, we're all here. Okay, so let me get started.
Hi, Patience, haven't seen you in a long time.
Who's that? I can't see.
That's Ray Smock.
Hey, Ray.
How you doing?
Just fine. It's a great thing to have you here for the 4th of July.
Well, thanks.
All right, so this is our little 4th of July show, and I was going to open this morning with a speech, or a fragment of a speech. Can
I introduce the show, John? Or
no?
Oh,
I'm sorry. Please do, Mike. I just paid that cop off, and here you go. I'll go.
We here at enlightenradio.com appreciate everyone that's listening and paying attention in the internet sphere. Our show today is Talking Socialism with your original dusty-footed philosopher and host, Mr. John Case, and his sidekick, who's always with him, and just as handsome as he was the last time I saw him, J.B. Christensen, and our various amount of guests, and we'd like to thank all of our sponsors who currently do not exist. Thank you. I'm the loudmouth guy, Mike.
And we have also my buddy Carl Davidson here this morning from
Good morning, Carl.
Beaver County.
Everyone.
And elsewhere at times.
You guys are getting to be a bad habit.
Yeah, I know.
Interrupt my putting out my Friday newsletter, but it's worse.
I have to say, Carl, we can't quit you.
Actually, Carl has it's online University of the Left, right? That's
right.
Yeah.
We can have that be a sponsor if you want to.
We should feature it maybe next show or something like that, because it's a great site for all kinds of educational materials. But let me get started this morning with a quote from you guys to chew on here and thinking about Independence Day. During the 1850s, Frederick Douglass spent about 6 months traveling extensively, giving lectures, and during one winter gave about 70 lectures during a tour that covered 4,000 to 5,000 miles. And on July 5th, 1852, he gave a speech at an event commemorating the signing of the Declaration of Independence held at Rochester's Corinthian Hall. It was biting oratory in which the speaker told his audience, quote, "The 4th of July is yours, not mine. You may rejoice, I must mourn." And he asked them, "Do you mean, citizens, to mock me by asking me to speak today?" And here is a fragment called by some one of the most moving passages in all of Douglas's speeches. What to the American slave is your 4th of July? I answer, a day that reveals to him more than all other days in the year the gross injustice and cruelty to which he is the constant victim. To him, your celebration is a sham, your boasted liberty an unholy license, your national greatness a swelling vanity, your sound of rejoicing are hollow and heartless, your denunciation of tyrants brass-fronted impudence, your shout of liberty and equality a hollow mockery, your prayers and hymns, your sermons and thanksgivings, with all your religious parade and solemnity, are to him mere bombast, fraud, deception, impiety, and hypocrisy. a thin veil to cover up crimes which would disgrace a nation of savages. There is not a nation on earth guilty of practices more shocking and bloody than are the people of the United States at this very hour. Happy 4th.
Wow.
Ray.
Gee, that's
He had a way with words, didn't he?
Ooh.
that was kind of a bummer.
Well, I want to invite Ray to go second here. He's, of course, the former official historian of the House of Representatives, I believe. Official is not in the title. There's some other grand title. Maybe he'll correct me on. And he's been retired for some time, and he ran the Byrd Center for Legislative Studies here at Shepherd University for quite a while. And a great program. And welcome, Ray, back to the program. He's been here once before. Or maybe even twice, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on coming up on the 4th of July. I know you've been writing extensively on the Trump administration, et cetera, and what are your thoughts today?
Well, first of all, nobody said it better than Frederick Douglass, because what he did is he cut through all the patriotic gore that has become associated with the 4th of July. Rightly so in a lot of ways, but he pointed out the fundamental flaw and set up a dichotomy that no one has said better. We're a nation that was started with the concept that all men are created equal and endowed by their certain creator with unalienable rights, life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. And yet the people who drafted that document, most of them, many of them, were slaveholders. And they weren't talking about slaves. They weren't talking about African Americans. And then when Douglass spoke, really, almost 80 years later, slavery still existed, and he described the United States perfectly as a savage nation. Even more so because it was founded on such great ideas. But that's the thing, that's the central element of American history that we have never grappled with completely. A nation that professes freedom and equality for all, that was founded on the backs of slaves. And here we are in 2020 with millions of people in the streets in this country and around the world talking about that freedom that has not yet been realized. This is the essence of American history and the struggle of American history.
Patience, you want to go next?
Yes, please. Two things. Not to take anything away from the great Frederick Douglass, but note that in his language, he always talked about he and him and men. There is half of the United States that completely got overlooked, even as the Civil War was fought over the issue of Black freedom. There was still no mention of women as yet another subset that was completely ignored. Now, that's just as an aside for my particular issue. But I think that the genius of both the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution is summed up in a different quote, and I never remember who said it first, but a man's reach should exceed his grasp, or what's a heaven for? The framers created something bigger than them. They did not have the imagination or worldview to see where it would lead, but they could create it nonetheless. And the responsibility has been on every generation since to find ways to move it closer to what it aspires to. For all that the last 4 years have just been a cesspool, I find myself more excited and more hopeful in many ways now than I have been my entire life, because I see real change. I mean, I was a child, but I lived through the 60s and I saw all of that stuff. but I never got a sense of optimism out of it. I got anger, I got disappointment, I got frustration, but not hopefulness. And that's what's different this time to me.
Very interesting. Who wants to go next? Carl.
I think all of you guys know here, I'm an old Maoist, you know, from my rebel youth, you know. And one thing it meant is that we learned dialectics Chinese style. And one of the basic principles we start is 1 divides into 2. So if you take that principle to the America, the 4th of July, 1 divides into 2. We have 2 Americas. We have the America of empire and colonial expansion, the colonial settler state. And then we have the America of popular democracy. The country was founded with 2 economic concepts in mind: exploitation and expropriation. You can tell the story from the point of view of the exploiters and the expropriators. That's the America of empire. But you can also tell it from the point of view of the underside of those 2 concepts, the exploited and the expropriated. The exploited were the indentured servants who were taken from being household settlers and turned into proletarians. Slaves, who in my opinion were part of the proletariat, a slave proletariat, and the native peoples who were expropriated in order for the slaves and the proletariat to have the means to work and thrive. And you could also include in that all of the women who are also appropriated as their labor appropriated into the household. So you can look at the 4th of July from the point of view of the America of empire, or you can look at it from the point of view of the America of popular democracy, which is, Langston Hughes told us, this is America still trying to emerge. So that's the way I tend to look at it. You know, I'm not a flag waver, but I'm not a flag burner either. On May Day, I'll raise the red flag. But I'm not one to burn American flags or wave them. So I just try to look deeper to understand what's really going on here and who we are. That's the most revolutionary question I pose to a lot of my students in my study groups. I said, what we're going to learn in a study group is who you are. And that's the most radical starting point we can, because most of us are not exploiters or expropriators.
James, did you wave your hand, or were you just?
I did.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
I did. Yeah, my perspective on that is on everything that's going on as far as racial equality, injustices, racial inequality, prison reform, addiction, you know, just voter turnout, the whole dynamic. I'm very encouraged by the happenings, because I too am a product of the 60s and the social unrest during that time. And some things happened, but I think I was too immersed in poverty to even recognize how substantial the move was at that point. Because what I got out of the last time when I was a part of social uprising was I got Vietnam out of it. To be quite honest with you, that's what I got out of it. And then when I returned home, I was so drugged out and you know, just so unwound. I guess you could say unwound or wound up. I don't know which it was. But fast forward to present. How do we connect to our youth in such an unconnected time? How do we pivot in the direction of our youth to gain their trust? How do we apply ourselves and be believable as responsible adults. You know, so those are some of my questions. And my real concern, one of the biggest pet peeves I got right now is so much apathy from Black people that I come in contact with, which I recognize them because I used to be one of them before I became engaged and involved. And so, you know, what I would like to see come out of this is to be able to have people who are willing to man a post until this thing is done. And I would like to be part of the connection between our young people and the powers that be.
Anybody else want to weigh in? JB?
Yes, I would like to. I appreciate what everybody has said. Frederick Douglass is one of my all-time favorite leaders. I discovered him late in life, but the thing that you read just now, John, I've never heard before, and I thought that was very powerful. And I really liked all the comments. I think it's ironic that Dick Cheney and Don Rumsfeld live on the property that was once owned by Frederick Douglass in the Eastern Shore of Maryland. That to me is just incredible that they could live there, knowing what he represented and how he is held in such high esteem by many latecomers like myself, and you know, really should go down in history a lot more than what he's gotten. He should be held higher in esteem, I think, and they should go so far as to you know, really exalt him in the eyes of the public and teach his history, teach his travels, his speeches in school from an early age, so that we have a better understanding of the truth of this democracy.
Let me ask. It's Independence Day.
Patience has their hands up, aren't you?
Oh, Patience.
No, I didn't. I was responding to something that James said about how do we connect with the younger generation on this.
Go ahead, Patience.
And I had typed the note that maybe we connect by joining them instead of telling them to join us.
Yeah, well,
You know, it's
okay.
Even though it's very difficult to keep up with them.
The dialectical, that's the dialectical part that Carl was talking about there.
That's right.
But Independence Day, I'm going to put forward a proposition that, see if you guys want to argue with it. We need less independence and less sovereignty and more internationalism and more global cooperation. You know, every problem that we face, it has a powerful national dimension. We can see the damage that has been done by the current, you know, individual number one. So it's not trivial. But there's hardly a problem on the health front, certainly on the environmental front and climate change issues. And on prosperity issues, you know, we're not going to get away from globalization. Somehow we have to get in charge of it and master it. So I'm going to say that really independence, the strongest trend and the one greater toward peace, prosperity, and the ability to do things like global pandemics and global inequalities, is not more nationalism, but less. What do you guys think? Ray?
What we're seeing today, we're confusing independence, which in the 4th of July context was independence of a nation from an oppressive king. Well, we need that same kind of thing because George III, which was the king of England at the time, was a wacky, crazy, dictatorial SOB. And in the United States in 2020, we have the same kind of character. He's not a king, but he acts like one and pretends that he's one. So we need a declaration from Donald Trump. But aside from that, we have right now in the middle of this pandemic, we are confusing independence and individual liberty with the collective need to social distance and wear masks. The idea that wearing masks has become a political issue, and people are saying that the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution give me a right to express myself by not wearing a mask, is absolutely the worst perversion imaginable of the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution.
Forgot to read the part about the common good.
Yeah, exactly. To provide for the common welfare, promote the general welfare, and the general welfare requires that we wear masks. And a federal government that has abdicated its role in this because it can't handle it, can't figure out what to do, and Trump says it's going to go away. They have abdicated their authority and turned it over to a bunch of incompetent governors to make decisions where a collective action is the only answer. And we see how that's worked in other nations, where culturally wearing masks is not a bad thing when viruses appear. And yet in the United States, we say, I have the freedom not to wear a mask and to continue killing my fellow Americans. This is a form of insanity.
Absolutely.
But
Patience, go ahead.
well, I was going to say the problem I've got is that the root cause or the fundamental problem is not Donald Trump, as much as I despise him. It is the Republican Party. It is that, and Ray could probably speak on this too. I mean, when the founders created the country, and Mike, you can weigh in too, when the founders created the country, they didn't include parties in either of those founding documents. And factionalism, as it was called back then, was anathema. But for purposes of convenience, as much as anything else, the body politic created political parties, and now we have the result that one party is despotic. And unless we can change that, or this election coming up is such a fundamental repudiation of what that party has done, I'm not sure what we do about all of those freedom-loving people who don't want to wear masks.
Anybody? Mike, you had your hand up.
Well, I just wanted to point out that over the course of the last 4 years, we've seen the striking down, like John was talking about, independence and nationalism. We've seen the striking down of agreements that seem to be working. The Paris Climate Accord, pulling out of that, everything that Obama was attempting to, in his administration, I believe, was attempting to do that very thing, was reach out to people, to reach out to other nations, to organize. I mean, look at what he was able to achieve with Ebola, and cutting that back, and only having 2 cases in the United States. It boggles the mind to think that you're going to take away an agreement that so many people worked on and thought was a fantastic idea because you have a problem with the skin color of the previous president. That is what drives me completely freaking insane.
I think it goes a little deeper than the Republican Party. I'm of the theory that about 30% of Americans aren't really Americans. If you want to take American as our country, unlike a lot of others, is defined by a coda, a creed, and you can sum it up in about 3 documents, probably, maybe more. You know, the Declaration, the Constitution, and Lincoln's Gettysburg Address. And maybe Frederick Douglas's speech there too. We can throw that one in. And that's when you become an American. You say I agree with those things and I accept them as a part of my political makeup. When I want to become an American citizen, that's what it means. I think about 30% of the country doesn't agree with those things. In fact, if you took the Bill of Rights and wrote it up like a petition and went door to door in your neighborhood, I think you might be surprised at how many people who wouldn't sign it, who think it's too radical. So I call this group, and it's Trump has mainly corralled them. Again, borrowing from dialectics, or they're fascists in themselves, but they're not yet fascists for themselves. And they're in the process of becoming fascists for themselves. But a lot of their ideas are fascist ideas. They're not American ideas. Take the notion that they say, well, immigrants in our country don't have any rights because they're not citizens. Well, that's wrong. It denies the 14th Amendment. The 14th Amendment said all persons under the jurisdiction of the United States have certain rights to due process and so on. It doesn't say all citizens, it says all persons. So what they're holding is a fascist idea of the Volk. Only the Volk have rights, which is a fascist, a kind of nationalism that undergirds fascism. And that's what Trump is building up. He's building up a fascist bloc based on people who don't really understand the American credo, or maybe they do understand it and don't agree with it. There's a number of right-wing fundamentalist preachers who think our founding documents are just infested with the devil's work, meaning the Enlightenment, and they want to get them and return the country to what they call biblical rule, right. Theocracy. So, there's a deep reaction in about I would say probably 30% of the population. And you could probably reduce that to a hardcore 15% who are really hardcore, and maybe another who are, the other 15% are softer. And maybe you can work with them and win them back. But, it goes deeper. Parties rest on top of this. And so that's where I think we're at. We've got the Democratic Party spanning the whole rainbow. And then we've got Trump has taken the Republican Party and turned it into the base. And the base is the people who don't really agree with the American credo or the American coda.
That's a good lead into my next question, which is the other big question about the 4th of July and Independence Day is that what is the difference between a revolution and a reform approach to change? And I'm going to make a proposition, and that is, it has to do with some of the discussion we've had so far. The Civil War was not just a regime of evil men. It was an economic system out of which a whole population made their living in one class or another. The relationship between Great Britain and its colony in the United States was a political built upon, an economic relationship that we were going to be shipping great goods over to England for purposes of manufacture and use over there. And those relationships became structurally incompatible, probably independent in a certain way of anyone's particular political theory like that. But at a certain point, change becomes impossible in one form, like the slave system or the colonial system, and you can't legislate it away. I mean, my question to you is that question of revolution versus reform still relevant?
It's still relevant, but it's not on the agenda at the moment. What's on the agenda at the moment are radical structural reforms. Revolution is on the agenda. There's a passage in John Steinbeck's Grapes of Wrath where Muley's farm is being tractored out, and he runs and gets his gun, and he wants to shoot the guy who's driving the tractor, who's just one of his neighbors. And so Preacher Casey tries to talk him out of it. And so Muley's standing there with his gun. He says, "Who do I shoot? Who do I shoot?" So when you got millions upon millions of people being like Muley, asking the question, "Well, who do I shoot?" Then it's time to talk about revolution. Before then, we talk about radical structural reforms.
Okay, I wasn't submitting it as a choice. I really wasn't, okay, because I don't actually believe in that. But I observed that, you know, there are a lot of people, and I don't think it's just the Trumpers, who are losing confidence in the American democratic system.
Right.
That's been going on for quite some time, John.
And it's right, and its ability to move forward out of a state of virtual paralysis while all these contended forces are trying to take us apart. And so, and that institutional failure environment is one in which it's pretty difficult to predict, you know, how things go or not go. I just like to get, and I'm obviously in a crisis. So I'm going to ask Ray, who are we in a crisis really? And are we still in a crisis even if we win this election? And how deep is the problem, Ray Smock? Well, I still got you here. I know I promised you 15 to 20 minutes, and now I got you longer. But while I got
all right.
You, okay.
I'm not going anywhere. I'm sort of,
yeah, okay.
That's because we're so interesting.
Getting rid of Donald Trump is the business of the hour, but it does not end the crisis that we're in so many fundamental ways. And the Black Lives Matter movement and all the other social justice movements and activities that are going on in the country are going to be just as relevant and pertinent with Trump gone, even more so, because they might have a chance to get some things actually legislated. But the crisis is manifold. The pandemic is not going away. The next president, assuming it's Joe Biden, will be faced with the same pandemic, and he will then immediately try to move to have the federal government take control of the situation, and that's not going to be easy since we've already had a year and a half or so of muddling through with the states and so on. So the crisis is there in terms of the pandemic. It's also there in terms of all the issues of rebuilding our trust around the world, the global warming issue that is going to get worse and is not getting any better. You know, right, we're going to be in crisis mode, and it's going to require this kind of collective action and globalism that Donald Trump has been trying to put down forever. This is a world, our crises are worldwide, not just within the United States or in whatever is happening in Arizona right now with the pandemic. We can't think like that any longer.
Patience.
I am not as concerned about rebuilding international trust as many experts are, and I am not an expert. But when I look at it, I think to myself, there's two thoughts. First of all, we have had 80 plus years of the United States being the tent pole, if you will, for world progress, whether it's social progress, economic progress, justice, whatever you want to look at. And I don't believe, as bad as he is, I don't think that the orange Covidiot has managed to destroy all of that. That it's like muscle memory. You know, when we have a sane president again, our allies around the world and our enemies will remember who we are. Related to that, I think that the United States, and it comes back to that idea of the tent pole, with what we're going through at the moment, we have the opportunity to set an example around the world for how to respond to an aspiring despot. You know, we have institutions that are tainted, but they haven't disappeared. We have a population that is, if you look at any of the polls, overwhelmingly rejecting where the Covidiot wants to go. And I think that people in other countries who are wrestling with their own issues will look at what we do and say, hey, these institutions, they may crumble around the edges, but they don't disappear. These people who talk about these values, they may get off track, but they show that they can get back to it. And I think that's important.
That's a good case for optimism there, Patience. But
It
it might not include
absolutely
police
is.
departments, but
We don't know. We don't know. You know, I Patience for presidents. I'm telling you. Listen. The kidneys are failing. The heart is not pumping out enough blood and oxygen. I mean, it's just mangled. But the body is still there.
And the brain.
And the brain is still there. And we still got movement. So that's where my optimism comes in. There are things, revolution. So Patience is talking revolution. We've already asked for reform for the last, 80 years? Patience? I mean, it's reform. We're asking, but now the revolution. So the answer to your question, the difference is,
yes, and we can show that it's a peaceful revolution.
it's a peaceful revolution. We're using smart fists
Yes.
to fight with, as opposed to a lack of education that was kind of our leadership many years ago in the Black community. They were leaders, leaders, and people in the struggle, and people who knew how to come through adversity and show us a way, a better way, but we've gotten smarter. And so the revolution is headed this way, and it's long overdue, because some things need to be gotten rid of. There's heart surgery that needs to take place. There's, we need to, if we got to amputate a leg, because the technology has given us an opportunity to put a prosthetic over there, and it seems to work much better.
A kidney transplant.
Yeah.
I don't know. Right. You got a sermon in the works here, James.
That's a great analogy. That's a great analogy.
Because these are desperate times that take historical desperate measures. Revolution with smart fists. I do my walk. When I do my walk, I walk like this, because I'm getting ready for revolution. When they handcuff me, I am going to have to be physically able and to be that beacon of light for those of us who are too weak to be handcuffed like this, to show them that they can persevere. And so I'm practicing now to be in leadership. So this is how I do. I do this maybe half a mile, and I take my arms down and I walk a little bit and kind of shake it out, but then I lock them back again.
Right.
And I walk a half a mile, or as far as I can walk, because these are the kinds of soldiers, that are needed. And so,
speaking of
president.
Yeah, you're right. Well, that way, then she could give up hustle and writing,
James, you can be my campaign manager.
You can hire your own speechwriters, Patience. There you
go. James' analogy, I thought, was excellent, and the only thing missing was the doctors that are working on the patient, and that is the people. The people.
We're losing you a little bit.
Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, you go. We lost you for the last part.
Sorry, I disappeared for a little while there. I apologize. There was a cat screaming in our bathroom downstairs.
Let me ask, move on here to the question of, we got August coming up before the elections, and we just had a great discussion the other day, and it's already, spidering around about actions to take in the month of August, especially around the time of the anniversary of Dr. King's March and other mobilizations take place. It'll be the beginning of the heating up of the election season as well. And we're talking about a caravanning project here in Jefferson County that the Labor Council, hopefully, and they're going to have to meet virtually. They haven't met, since actually the pandemic started. So, but they're going to meet. Anyway, and the local NAACP chapters, especially the one in Martinsburg, which is involved in a very intense and important dispute related to people that were arrested there and placed on high bail and for exercising free speech rights. And I'm sure that in other areas, I just wanted an update about, I know we have Beaver County here anyway. I would get a discussion about ways in which everybody might get involved in this kind of a project. The theme currently being contemplated, nothing's been decided, would be racial justice, health, and economic recovery. Anyway, patience.
One of the things I've been surprised at in the current climate is that no one has gone back to the Jefferson County Commission and demanded that that damned Confederate plaque be removed from the courthouse. We had that fight and the commission declined thanks to its reactionary members. Back in like 2017, it
Right.
was so, or 2018. I mean, long before we started having people marching in the streets. I want to go back to the county commission and make a stink about that.
I think it's already gone, Patience.
Do you? There's been nothing
Yeah.
reported on it. I've been searching.
I know, but I thought it was like a year ago they had some quiet ceremony where they removed it. They kind of
And no one
Hush,
and no one reported on it.
well, I'm just saying that's my recollection.
Yeah, well, let's check on it. I'm not sure.
Okay.
What it's saying.
Maybe we'll take a little drive over there.
But how about so caravanning?
We had one here. We had one here in Beaver County, which we did it for around Medicare for All. Our Progressive Democrats of America was the core of it, and they brought in some other allies. And they met in the Giant Eagle supermarket parking lot, and they got 26 cars in it. And then they decorated all the cars with signs for Medicare for All. And then they drove through the streets of downtown areas, different towns. You'd be surprised how effective it was. They were kind of, all the people would come out from the sidewalks and high five them and give them a fist and right on. Then they drove up to the hospital and circulated around there and stopped and gave a speech, then came back and gave some speeches at the courthouse. It turned out it was pretty good. But I think that for the month of August, Trump has already given us something to rally around. He is now suing all 50 states to do away with mail-in ballots.
That's ridiculous.
And so these are suits that we're going to have to fight. And my feeling is that this is an excellent idea to organize some caravans. This is going to be decided on the state level, so it'd be an excellent idea in the month of August to organize some caravans to go to the state capitals and tell them that we want, this is voter suppression. Because he wants us to have to risk our lives in order to vote.
Which we will if we have to, but really,
we will if we have to, exactly. But on the other hand, we have to fight. We're going to have to fight for the mail-in ballot. And
because McConnell, there's been like 4 packages put on his desk at different iterations, and he's not moved them at all.
Right. Well, it's like I say, it's going to be decided on the state level. So let's get our caravans to go and encircle the state capitals.
It'll make a good issue for us because we're going to be trying to get rid of our, attorney general we currently have
right
in that time,
and see if we can get some 18-wheelers in it too. When the Teamsters had their lines,
right?
When they brought
patience. Yeah.
Well, and I was going to say, related to that, as we're caravanning for instance to protect mail-in ballots, we should also be pushing for the handful, because there aren't many, big venues to use as voting sites. One of the things that, and this brings in some of the other stuff we've been talking about, one of the things I was really excited about, did you see what the Atlanta Hawks did?
No.
That was through LeBron James's organization.
They have offered their basketball arena as a massive voting site for the November election to try to address all of the problems in Georgia, in Fulton County, in DeKalb County, where they've been cutting back on the number of voting sites. And the Hawks said, hey, if you don't have enough room, we'll do it. And it's the same kind of thing. Where did they just did it for a primary, and it made a huge difference because you could bring in hundreds of voters at the same time. And for instance, we could do that in the Ranson, in Ranson, in the convention center, as much as anyone ever has a convention in West Virginia.
Anybody else? One other announcement here.
James wanted to say something.
James, you have your hand up, James?
You're muted.
You're muted, boy.
Yeah, no, I was just responding from the Civic Center that's so underused.
Yeah, right.
Oh my goodness.
And that is going to follow on suit with LeBron James, just to tack on to what has an organization, a voter registration and a voter drive organization that's going to really influence a lot of these big venues in the NBA to offer up their services. Not only they're not just switching it over, they're having the people that work there as pollsters, work there to help to set everything up. And the advantage of these large venues, as we all can tell, is social distancing
and massive parking.
Yeah.
By the way, for West Virginia here, you should note that I'd recommend you all check out Sammy Brown's Facebook page. And she has a copy there of the executive order from the governor of West Virginia, basically taking control of all of the federal money coming in through CARES. I
wonder how much is going to stick to his fingers.
Not having a legislative session, and at the same time telling them they must, Health and Human Services, almost every division, including public safety, has to reduce their current budget by millions of dollars. So there's what the governor will actually end up using the money for, since he promised there wouldn't be any budget cuts, okay, because of the money, but now he has the money, but there's going to be budget cuts. What's he going to do with all the money? And so that's, and this is going to affect directly both education, health services, and I believe public safety too is included. So maybe the federal troops are going to come in and take care of it. Anyway, so we got plenty of reasons to get the people out. I think caravans are a safe way to do it, more or less. Okay, it requires a lot of political coordination though, because obviously, everybody so far we've been talking to wants to get Sheriff Pete to lead the whole thing. And in order for him to do that, I think we got to get the towns to understand what's going to happen. It can't just be if we just do it. If we do it in a big way and get a lot of things going, it'll make a big impact. Okay, and not only that, it will, especially if people who are running for office feel like it's going to help them as well. Okay, I think that would be a big boost. Okay, so
yeah, it could be practice. Think of it as practice for roving guerrilla bands once we get further down the pipe.
Well, yeah, right. Once things get worse, and then we, yes, there we go.
I think Mad Max was a bunch of caravans.
Paul Revere,
Caesar Rodney.
Which one, JB? Beyond Fury Road?
Yes.
Okay, well, we're at the a good end of our show, I think, for today, Mike. Unless anybody else has a major manifesto to read off, I want to thank Ray Smock for joining us today, and Carl for calling in again. And I see that Denise Miles is actually listening in today, and I say hello to her from. Wherever she is. Okay, I know her. Anyway,
John.
then James Boyd.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody. Okay, we'll send this out, get a video cast, and you guys can share it if you will. All right, take care. Yeah.
Good.
All right.
Bye-bye.
All right.